Hey, small group today, small but mighty. Welcome to the Portland Utility Board, a meeting of community volunteers tasked to advise council on items related to Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services. I'm Lauren Rosencrans, co-chair for the pub. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. Public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles. In our meeting spaces and interactions with Pub, while every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted towards people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. By putting our principles into action, we are active and deliberate. We speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct rather than the person.
My name is Archer Masters, and I'll quickly run through the meeting guidelines. State your name before you speak, and if appropriate, the name of the person you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the co-hosts, myself and Donna. Please limit to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for technical assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. We may lower your hand once you begin speaking to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hand and you'll be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking if desired. It is not required. Please mute your microphone when not speaking, and if connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute yourself. Public comment is taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or Jonna Lynn or raise your hand during the comment period. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. The meeting's being recorded with AI assistance. Pass it back to you for agenda.
Sure. So we've already done our call to order and disclosure of communications. Today we will, following public comment and review of the minutes, we will discuss pub recruitment, council budget updates, review the work plan and upcoming priorities, and then follow with announcements for the next meeting before we adjourn. Okay. So just for a brief disclosure of communications, have there been any comments outside of these meetings that we need to discuss? Anything with, excuse me, city leadership or bureau staff? Any items worth disclosing? Okay, hearing nothing, we can move forward with public comment. If any members of the public, please use the chat box to sign up to give public comment. You'll be called by name to give comment. Also be able to send any written comment to utilityboard@portlandoregon.gov. Have we received any public comments prior to the meeting?
We've not received any in advance, and I believe there's not any general members of the public in the room, so we will proceed.
Okay. Okay. So we received the June 3rd minutes. Hope everybody was able to review. I did review, but I wasn't there, so they seemed like they made sense to me. Does anybody have any suggested changes or corrections?
And just for the record, I'll maybe I should have done this in disclosures. I just wanted to acknowledge for the record that we do not have a full quorum of the board. We do expect one more member to show up. They're just going to be a little bit late to the meeting. But in absence of a quorum, we just continue to operate as a subcommittee of the pub. And so for any decisions or accepting of the minutes, those kinds of things, we'll just make sure that there's opportunity to hear from everybody, since the majority of the pub is represented in this meeting of current membership, and have Lauren kind of give the okay as the chair to go ahead and post materials or proceed. So we'll just coordinate directly in
Okay.
absence of a full quorum.
Okay, thanks, Amy. So won't be doing any accepting today. You're just we can discuss any changes, but make accept any of the minutes offline is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, well, while we're here, if anybody who is present, any specific changes or corrections to discuss now? Okay, if not, I'm fine with moving that conversation offline, Amy. Give people time to review.
Sounds good. So as we open up this next item, Lauren, I'll just jump in because I did want to announce for the board members who are here. And then we'll pass the floor at any point to any of the folks who participated in the recruitment subcommittee. So just a reminder that at a prior meeting, the two reappointments of the current members who are on their ending their first term, technically yesterday, and are recommended for reappointment. So those will be going to council, along with the recommendations related to the new members who were participated in this most recent recruitment process. Since the subcommittee met, we did get confirmation from a current pub member, Mally Hagshanis, who had to resign early from the board. So that created another vacancy. So there were a total of 6 vacancies. We were looking to fill 5 of those. And one of those is the labor representative. So we're still attempting to coordinate with labor folks on their process related to filling that. So we still hope to get more information from them. But the process for this year was for those 5 voting member vacancies. And again, we'll include the labor at the time it goes to council, if possible. Just a reminder of the kind of intent of the recruitment committee was to attempt to achieve diversity and balance of perspectives, knowledge, areas of interest, lived experience, and community connections. And also balancing that with both new and returning members. The goal is to have the subcommittee present to you all today the recommendations that came through that process. And then it goes through the next phases, which is review with the policy committee, the council's transportation infrastructure committee, and then subsequently with the full council, so that those formal appointments take place. We were trying to scramble to make it work for the next Transportation Infrastructure Committee, but unfortunately we're not able to achieve that. So right now are tentatively scheduled for the July 21st committee meeting, and then it would go to full council on August 6th if it proceeds as planned. In the meantime, we are fortunate to have the pub members with expiring terms still continuing to participate. So thank you for doing so. And by code are permitted to do so until their replacements are appointed or they're formally reappointed. So we identified, as was discussed in the full board meeting, just the breadth of the skills and experience that code indicates that pub members should, that we should try to have a balance across a wide range of potential skill areas. The areas that were highlighted in red in civil engineering and health sciences were two where we do not currently have board members with that specific experience and skill set. And then the ones in orange are just those that were slightly lower, either on the interest or experience side of things. And so we provided this just as background information so that subcommittee members could consider that as they were considering the applicants. And now I will pass the floor to either maybe Karen or Lorraine. And I will pull up on the screen some basic information about each of the candidates. We had a really strong candidate pool. So if you guys want to share anything about the process or the specific candidates, I will pass it to you.
Karen, you want to go first, and I will jump in, or you want me to jump in?
I was going to ask if you would go first, but I would be happy to. Yeah, go ahead, Lorraine. Let's do it that way. You go first, and I'll add anything that.
Okay. So we had a great group of board members to review, who reviewed the candidates, and we had a really strong. We really had some very strong candidates, and I was quite pleased across the board and people's willingness to want to volunteer. And then, of course, we got down to the nitty-gritty of scoring, which we did independently of each other. And it was really, it was good to see that there wasn't much variation in how the scoring went. And that is not groupthink. I think the reviewers were on the same page about where it is what we needed and what we were looking for. There were a few minor outliers, but however, we discussed that. We discussed it at the meeting. So once we saw that we were kind of aligned in certain areas and stuff, we looked at the outliers, as I indicated, some of the outliers, which were not that significant. However, we gave it a lot of time to discuss those outliers. And it was an interesting discussion that we had. And again, I think what came throughout, what was the theme throughout our review was that recognizing the skills that we needed, but also understanding that why it is we lead with our equity lens and why it is we center on the served communities. And so that was the theme that ran through. You know, we had people who were civil engineers, which is a fantastic thing. However, in the conversation, it's like, okay, how do they understand that what it is they do is aligned with what PUB does? We had people in the medical field. And again, how does that align with what we do as PUB, where we center underserved community, how we do that, how we talk about affordability, how they spoke about affordability in their interviews, right? How are they balancing the need for funding utilities, but also affordability? So all those things, we were there, the nuances of what we do, and I'm preaching to the choir here, as you understand. As a result of that, we came up with 4 solid candidates and alternatives. So that's how rich the pool was. 4 solid candidates, and I think 2, and you could correct me because I'm going off my memory, and that is not something anyone should rely on. I'm telling you. So so we had 4 recommendations and 2 alternatives, because as we know, life happens and the composition of the board can change overnight. I don't know how much more details you want me to go into, if
I'll-
that is enough or.
That was a great summary, Lorraine. I'll just add that yes, you're correct. Your memory is right on. So you did identify that since we've had the additional vacancy declared. We have just what we're presenting here today is all five, so including that first alternate. So 5 recommendations for the board, and then 1 alternate that will still kind of remain on the list as one that the subcommittee signed off on. So if another vacancy were to come up over the course of the year before another recruitment, then we could potentially tap into that. And then I'll pass to Karen to, if there's anything you want to add. And I do have several slides here that just have just a few of the high points. We don't have the names on here yet because we're still waiting for responses. The timeline between when we, we're able to get word out and get confirmation back is somewhat tight. So before disclosing any of that in a public setting, we are just kind of highlighting some of the skills and things that the recruitment committee noted during the conversations that some of these candidates had. And I see, Joanne, you have your hand raised. Do you want to, Karen, do you have something you want to say first, or shall we take Joanne's question?
Let's hear from Joanne, and then I'll
Okay.
fill in a couple things.
Oh.
My question is, does Pub have the authority to expand the?
Joanne, I don't know if anyone else is having trouble hearing you.
Can't hear you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Just very faint.
let me check my microphone.
Sounded like you might just be connected to a microphone that's far away from you.
Is this any better?
A little.
It's a little better. I can at least hear. I heard the beginning of whether Pub has the capacity to expand.
Here we go. How's that?
Better.
Okay. Zoom likes to adjust my mic volume, which is super fun. Yeah, do we have the authority to expand the number of members on Pub? And the reason I'm asking is ever since I started serving on Pub, we've had questions about quorum. And so I thought I heard that we have 4 people selected and 4 alternates. Can we add like a couple more alternates as people who can just be on Pub so that we can have a quorum more often?
So the number of designated Pub members is defined in code. So it would require code change to change that. But what we're trying, we've also not been in circumstances. This year has been unique in the challenges and in the numbers of Pub members. And so we've been down lower than has historically been the case. And folks have had challenges to participate in, so we've had some overlapping. But we have 11 voting members, and you need at least 6 voting members in order to have quorum. And so that's really the threshold, which is, just a little bit more than half. So as long as we can consistently get participation from a larger pool of members, then we're doing okay. However, part of the challenge was that we had vacancies come up earlier mid-year and we weren't able to fill those. So that was part of the intention in the subcommittee identifying some alternates from the pool of candidates. We've already needed to pull in one of those, before we get to the appointment. So we'll be hopefully advancing with the 5 and then just have the 1 alternate in the wings in case something were to happen. And we've also heard, as other boards have gone to council, at least one council member indicate interest in council also hearing about the alternate so that they could just approve and not have you come back for that approval later. But there's not a clear process yet under the current committee and council structure. So I'm not 100% sure whether we'll be able to achieve that. But we would at least be able to cut down on process because we'd have somebody that if they remain available, they know that they're an alternate and could participate. So we're trying to kind of achieve
that's great.
somewhere in the middle without changing the numbers, the overall
Yeah.
numbers.
Yeah, I appreciate all the strategic thinking there. Thank you.
And we'll talk a little bit later too, but the city is also looking at advisory boards and engagement just generally. And so there may be some things that come out of that process as well, that might inform PUB's review of code and other things in the future. All right, so I'll pass it back to Karen, or if you want me to just share a little bit about the individuals, I can do that as well.
Well, let's do both at the same time, because that was how I was going to relay my summary of the experience, was by highlighting the areas where the subcommittee thought that they were, that we were bringing in sort of new skills, idea, experience, and then what we heard the values of the candidates were bringing, and that was mostly in the answer to the first question, which was, basically, tell us why you're interested in joining the pub. And I think just in summary, I think it was a really exciting and very very interesting, very compelling, let's say, candidate pool. So just that, knowing that there were, 11, and we ended up interviewing 10, but that many people that wanted to, get back to their communities and specifically were interested in pub and pub business was really, really exciting. So that all being said, I can talk off the slides, Amy, and just highlight some of the things that stood out to us on the committee. So candidate 3 had private utility experience from sort of finance and budget and IT, did I say IT experience? So, in addition to, that wasn't all, but, in addition to some of the other points there about having I think that was another thing that really kind of the candidates that sort of rose to the top were able to, in these conversations they were having among themselves, have really thoughtful discussions about trade-offs. And the folks that were able to sort of take their experience and then sort of articulate how they would sort of draw on that experience in making decisions on the pub and sort of recognizing these trade-offs. Those were the candidates that kind of bubbled, I guess, to the top, as Lorraine described. We all kind of centered on those candidates. So candidate 3 did that as well. And as mentioned, Amy mentioned, candidate 4 brought really solid civil engineering background. So, super strong technical knowledge, and as well also brought a lens of working for an advocacy nonprofit. So had again, some very compelling and interesting thoughts about integrating, taking into account equity and sort of all decisions that the utilities engage in, and really did a nice job, as Amy indicated in the slide here, that again, the candidates that could demonstrate that collaborative aspect, right, of working with each other, building off of someone else's idea, crediting, right, like, wow, that's a really interesting idea, and then maybe taking that one step further or building on it, or and Candidate 4 was, yeah, really stood out for that. As Lorraine mentioned, also Candidate 6 brought experience that we don't currently, and in my experience, I don't know that we've ever had on the board, with bringing health sciences. I mean, you will see when you meet the candidate at a very high level. So bringing that experience, technical knowledge, but also adding to that how one uses and advocates based on that knowledge. So very strong and passion around community engagement and making information accessible to the community, not just health information, right, but budgetary information, and sort of articulating that it's important for folks who are serving on advisory boards, community boards, to be the to recognize the importance of that we can be kind of the link, right, to help take some of this very dense information and make sure that it's being presented in a way that any member of the public could understand, oh, this is what this means to me. And this candidate was really great at expressing how important that was. Let's see, Candidate 7 was someone who articulated, had very, compelling reasons in that first question, like, why are you interested on this particular board at this particular time, right? And had a real interest and excitement about the city transition and about the One Water initiative, was also very well informed on those topics, and stressed multiple times what was I going to say? Oh, just the sort of the strategic thinking, and how can we as community advocates be the most influential and most effective? How do we make those sort of strategic balances so that we can do the jobs that we have come to do, which is represent the community voice and actually influence policy decisions. And was Candidate 7 also brings a very strong climate advocacy and climate justice advocacy. So I think we thought that might fill a nice niche on the board. Let's see, Candidate 10. Oh yeah, Candidate 10. So Candidate 10 brings utility experience for sure. And also has had a long, several years of work in another city utility, and we thought that could be extremely valuable, that sort of lens on how things are done in other places, but not judgment wise, better, worse, but just there are different ways to approach problems, and bringing that experience from another city we thought could be super helpful. Yeah, exactly. Experience living and working in another city. Let's see, Candidate 2 filled, we were thinking that this candidate, in terms of what they would bring to the board, that we didn't necessarily have expertise in, but we have certainly a lot of interest, and there are intersections with urban forestry. So this, again, this candidate would be an alternate if there was a vacancy in the future on the board. But again, we were drawing pretty pretty fine lines between, you know, many very excellent people. So anyway, and yeah, so I'll probably stop there and kind of might be, oh, I go, okay, is that everybody? Did I go through 5? Okay.
Yep, you got them.
Okay.
So I think most of the information that I have, Karen already touched on. I just wanted to highlight a few things. One is I anticipate, because the next steps include going to council with this and the change in how council is structured, that questions will come up around district representation. It's not explicitly included as part of PUB's process because code defines, you know, what skill set, and the only designated position on the board is for the labor represented. But we are still trying to track that information. PUB does have representation from all the districts, but it is not evenly distributed in any way. It's not designated in that way. And so there may be questions related to that, but the area, as they both touched on, that is more of the focus is kind of achieving the balance in skills, experience, and community representation. So that those are some of the gaps that really are the focus of the current appointees as well as a consistent emphasis on equity across the board. There is one of the appointees and an alternate that are city employees. And in prior years, there has been some conversation on the board and some potential concerns raised about having too many staff represented positions on the voting member side of things. But the recommendations that came from this subcommittee are consistent with recommendations that have come from prior as well, just about focusing on the skills that they bring, the communities that are represented, and achieving the balance as the goal. So I feel like that has been adequately addressed. We've seen this before. This is just the process flow. So right now we're presenting it to you all so that full PUB or the chairs, in absence of a full quorum, can advance the recommendation. We're taking that recommendation then to council, the transportation and infrastructure first, and then full council. So it's tentatively going to be on July 21st, and we'll be communicating that to all of the recommended appointees as soon as we wrap things up with this meeting. Because it's the first interface directly with that committee outside of the budget process, it is an opportunity to present a little bit of information very briefly about PUB's purpose, your membership, the legal basis of why PUB exists, a little bit about the process, the recommendations, and then, as I mentioned, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to get approval through council of an alternate, or whether we'll just keep that alternate and go through the process if and when needed. But those are kind of the next steps as far as we're concerned. So we are working with all of those members, and then just want to make sure that as we're presenting, that we're covering the content that you all find to be most important with this limited time before the committee, and welcome whether staff is presenting that or PUB representatives want to help with the presentation. That's also an option. And then I just wanted to open the floor for the other members who did participate in the process. If there's anything based on what we covered that we've missed, or that you just want to call out, I just want to give thanks to everybody who did. We had 3 PUB members who were able to engage. Karen, Lorraine, and Kyle also participated. And then we also had some Bureau staff representatives. So Farshad and Sherry, who I believe are in the room, were also able to participate. So just thank you to the committee who took the time to review all the candidates and give us the feedback. Any questions or comments? Kyle, I see you're up.
Yes, thank you. A couple quick comments. First, as Amy mentioned, I put myself on the committee. I reviewed all the candidates and gave notes. I was unable to attend the call itself, but I just want to say thank you to my colleagues. I was bummed to miss out on the conversation because I was genuinely excited to like mix it up. But I arranged a call with Jonah and Amy afterwards, and I'm in full support and agreement and concert with the decisions of the committee rendered. And it was very much in sync with what I was seeing as well. So just thank you to everyone on that call. I also just wanted to clarify, I might have missed the very beginning, but Amy or Karen, for candidates 3, 4, 6, 7, and 10, excluding the alternate of number 2, all 5 of those folks you've reached out and coordinated and they're committed and confirmed? Or that's
We
pending
are
us
still
first?
waiting to hear back from 2. So we haven't closed the loop. So they've been informed, and but we asked them to respond at least by tomorrow. So we're sending out reminders again, and we'll try to connect with them. It's kind of the time of year where people start taking vacations, and so we may just be hitting in our time window at a time that is harder to get in touch with us. But yeah,
Gotcha.
we'll continue that over the next week and try to finalize that. But I don't anticipate, given how recent the interviews are and the interest and excitement at the time, that that they'll proceed.
Cool. I got 2 more quick ones then. Thank you very much, Amy. I do also want to, from listening to all of the calls and also reading all the cover sheets, really re-emphasize or give greater support to the points that Karen was raising, which was really about flow of communication, opening up and inviting others to talk. And it's just really exciting to have such depth of technical knowledge across multiple spectrum. So it's a lot of really strong folks who really want to show up strong for Portland and then use the skills they built over the course of their careers and education. There's one point I want to raise to the board that is not like necessarily actionable right now, but I raised this to Jonah and Amy, and it's thinking about as this number of folks, the number of folks sitting on the board expands and the nature of these hour-and-a-half calls, I really think that being strategic with what we're pursuing and approaching subcommittee structure to allow small clusters of individuals to pursue and synthesize and research and then propose strategies or actions to take place to the larger board is going to really be valuable in the coming year once these folks come on. Just to move us away from something that's a little bit more reactionary, where we only have an hour and a half to slam a lot of consensus in, and instead we're able to break out. Subject matter experts can weigh in alongside community representation, and then we can bring this up and really contribute in a substantive way. So that's just a really I feel very strongly about that, and I'd love to find ways to solve for it. So those are my points. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle. Alexis, and then Farshad.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to the recruitment committee for your thorough review. I participated on it last year, and so I know it's a lot of work and is also like an extremely rewarding thing to participate and do. And also to just say thank you for walking through each of the candidates, and I'm so glad that we had such a strong candidate pool. And just a note to commend how kind of about how strategic you all were in looking through these different folks and thinking about different skill sets, but ensuring, right, that equity was centered and that we were values aligned with how the pub operates and what we bring into this work. And so really, really appreciate that. And I'm excited to have these new folks on board.
Okay, I'll jump in. I'm going to repeat a lot, but I wanted just to say personally, thank you to Amy and John Lynn for facilitating such a helpful process for 2 reasons in particular. I think that the format of the group conversations and videotaping those helps the committee find the time to engage when otherwise it would be impossible to fit that level of review into a schedule. So thank you for continuing this format. It's very helpful. And I also want to acknowledge that the conversations that are unlocked in this format were so much more impactful than if we were having kind of a bilateral interview with individual applicants. The dynamics that I observed unfolding in each of those three groups, I think brought a lot more personality and a sense of how each of those candidates would be participating in a setting like this. And I think also unlocked areas of the conversation that we couldn't have predicted and designed for in particular questions. So I felt similar to last year. This was a very rich, data-rich process, and I felt very confident in my scoring. I too I was not able to participate in the conversation, which I regret. But I want to hold up that, and I think my scoring reflects this was an exceptional pool of candidates. And this is the kind of problem you want to have, is having a hard decision amongst a really strong group of folks that have a clear commitment to doing this kind of service work. So thank you to Pub staff and the committee. And I'm really, really energized about the new voices that will be introduced to Pub.
All right. Thank you, everybody. So I think I heard kind of positive feedback from all of those and the rest of including those who weren't in the final conversation, but otherwise many of the folks here today participated in the subcommittee recommendations, so generally have been supportive. So in absence of the fact that we can't achieve quorum until we get our numbers up, we'll move forward with the recommendations as they've been provided, unless there's any concerns that folks have. If you have any feedback about items to make sure are highlighted in the presentation to council or in preparation for that, please reach out to me and let me know. And we don't really need a formal motion and a vote at this point since we don't have a quorum, but in absence of that, we'll get Lauren's buy-off as chair, indicating Pub support for us to move forward. All right, not seeing any hands, so I'm gonna move us to the next topic. And I think it's way more of me talking at folks today than I typically like in these meetings, because I prefer to hear from you all. I don't think that there's a ton that I need to cover directly in talking about budget updates, but I also welcome any of the folks in the room. I see that we have representatives from both Water and BES, that if there's any emerging information, certainly feel free to raise your hand or unmute yourself and speak up. I welcome your input. I did share with Pub members via email, so if you haven't taken a look at it, please take a look at the information that I sent out. It does just have some of the general highlights from a citywide perspective of what has moved forward in the budget that was adopted. There were many conversations, lots of amendments and interesting dialogue and from council members. So it was a very interesting budget process to observe this year. There are a number of budget notes that have both direct and indirect impacts on utilities, most of them related to consolidation. There's some engagement related budget notes that I summarized in the communications that went out that are continuing to move forward, and we'll begin to see kind of what some of the plans and ideas are coming from that pretty quickly, because there's at least an initial report to council due by August 1st, I believe, on some of the elements of that. So we will continue to keep pub members posted on what we know and what we see emerging. There also was an in-depth conversation regarding the system development charges, the waiver policy that was taken before the full council on June 25th. This is an area where PUB has shared some concern about the impacts to utilities and their infrastructure funding. There was acknowledgement of some of those impacts from some of the council members as it was discussed. And as I mentioned in the notes, that, the acknowledgement of that was then followed by a feeling or a sense that the benefits outweighed the costs or the risks to the putting this program forward, because of the dire need to create more housing in the Portland area and stimulate that growth. So it does go back for a second reading before council in July, as we understand it. And I think even when they closed that discussion, the president, encouraged all the council members to support it when it moved forward. And certainly from the conversation, the way that it went, it seems that it has pretty across the board support for advancing. So there will be some impacts as a result of that. So that's something that we'll need to continue to monitor. As a part of the discussion at council, there were some amendments made related to some reporting back to council at a regular time interval on how the progress is going and what how many units are being created, and kind of identifying the trends and whether it's accomplishing the intended goals. So I expect that we'll be able to see some more information about that as it moves forward as well. Anything that I missed as far as high-level highlights from Bureau folks, or any questions or comments from the group based on what you either saw or read or wonder about at this time? Arshad, go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. I just want to acknowledge, I think you mentioned how unusual, that's a very neutral way of characterizing this year's budget process. And it feels like a great relief that we're not only through the budget process, through the fiscal year, and we're moving on. I do want to just orient the pub that we are already focused on preparing for the fall, what was previously called the bump, but it's now called the TAO. It's the next round of kind of budget adjustments, and getting prepared for the 26-27 budget development. The utilities typically start much earlier than the rest of the city in budget development. And so I look forward to working with pub staff, pub leadership, and the pub on ways that we can learn from this last year and understand it will still be, there will be a lot of uncertainties and a lot of reaction in this next year's budget development, but I'm really looking forward to collaborating on the budget development and apply any lessons learned from this past year, so that we're collectively doing better and representing, demonstrating that we're representing pub's goals in our budgets moving forward. So I just want to, we crossed a hurdle, but there's another one's coming fast and furious. So just catch your breath.
Karen, go ahead.
Thanks, Amy. I just wanted to thank you and Jonna Lynn for the summary and for calling out the conversation and the conversation about the SDC waivers. So at least there seem to be some accountability measures or accountability milestones, maybe, or I don't know. And maybe an intent to develop some measures. And I would just say, well, first of all, I sure hope it works. I mean, I hope what appears to be a short-term gain does indeed justify the long-term risk or long-term cost. But I am pleased to see that there's at least talk of kind of checking in on as the year proceeds and the waivers go into effect and what indeed effect they are having on housing and what the budgetary effects are on the bureaus, as well as, I would say as they are related to environmental impacts, anyway, I just won't reiterate a lot of the concerns that I had, but I do hope that the future pub can really play an active role in really holding, maybe not so much the bureaus accountable, but holding the city council and the infrastructure committee accountable to indeed reporting on what the impacts of those SDC waivers are, and kind of keeping on them and make them show you, right, that it really is working and it's worth the cost. Anyway, thanks for calling that out in the summary. Really appreciated reading that.
Thank you, Karen. And I can't remember if I put it in the summary, hopefully I did, but just since we're talking about it now, for the SDC specific exemption, it's a 3-year timeline that they're talking about. So it will certainly continue to be part of anticipate pub's ongoing conversation, just as you learn about what the potential budget impacts are in the next budget cycle, which, as Farshad indicated, is already about to start up. So yeah, Alexis and then Kyle.
Yeah, thanks, Amy, for the update, and to both you and Jonalyn, as always, for the detailed emails. You make it very easy to wade through all of the information that's been out there, especially in this complicated year. A question on the SDC waivers, and mostly I missed, I think, the meetings where these were discussed at length by pub, but I guess I'm wondering, and listening to Karen talk right now about accountability measures, if there is an opportunity for us right now before the second reading to communicate that to council and to the committee, either in writing or by providing testimony, because I have as I said, I wasn't part of those conversations that the pub held earlier, but do hold that same, like, is short-term gain versus long-term loss concern that Karen just expressed, and would be very curious about what are the actual accountability measures, what are they actually going to be tracking, both from the building side, but environment, financial, et cetera, et cetera. And so I'm curious about what sort of opportunity we might have to reiterate that to council, especially if signs are indicating that this is moving forward. If we can express, like, our concern, our trepidation, and if it's going to move forward, here are the things that we ask be put in place to ensure that we're doing so in a responsible way.
I believe that those concerns and the pub's perspective have pretty clearly been articulated to council. And I did hear throughout the conversation a little bit of that come up. The public comment was taken at the first reading, so I don't believe at the next one that public comment will be taking place, but certainly can communicate. Pub at any time, we can communicate directly with council and or executive leadership around some expectations. The way, my recollection, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that the amendment was put in place kind of identifies a timeline for the development of those metrics and the reporting to be coming back to council. So I expect that that will be the tool that we'll use to kind of be tracking where it's going. And then it may be that after some of those reports, the first report, you know, an opportunity for feedback on whether those are sufficient or a reaction or how you're feeling about it is another opportunity for continued feedback in the future. One of the council members had, you know, indicated some concern about the overall fiscal impact. And I think one of the suggestions was to either set the limit or the timeline for that check back in a year to see how it's going and potentially limit it. And there wasn't receptivity to that kind of change as they were moving it forward. So there's a little bit of a disconnect between the total number of housing units and, you know, what that final fiscal impact is going to be. And I think in part because they're all just hopeful that there actually will be that many housing units created as a result based on current projections. So, you know, that's, I think, a problem for another day once we see some of that reporting.
Cool. Kyle Chipman, voting member. I always forget to say my name. It was a very similar, a question of similar spirit to the points that Alexis raised, building off of Karen's statement, which is what level of agency do we have to be present in this? Watchdog's too strong, but just like checking efficacy and amount of impact and value and trade-off and all that. So actually listening further, I think it feels like a good fit for its own subcommittee, right? Do we want to be like willy-nilly with subcommittees, or do we want to be very strategic in how they're set up? Because it's like a little cluster of people who are focused in a long-term way, who can connect every like 6 weeks or 2 months or something independently, and then just keep tabs and then keep the larger board abreast of what they're finding. And then we can escalate that. And again, kind of moving us away from something more reactive where we're waiting, but we are anticipating and staying at top. Is that a possible fit?
It's a possible one, although it will be dependent on the information that's available and the timeline that we can get that information from, you know, other parties. So, but we could explore what that will look like. Certainly, as once it's approved and moves forward, there'll be, I think with the way that it was implemented, it's an emergency ordinance, so it's happening right away. It's not waiting until fall for implementation. So I anticipate some of the planning around when the reporting would come might be somewhat anticipated, and we could at least get information about that and identify the right timeline for, you know, some designees of the board to make sure that they're reviewing that information more thoroughly and maybe coming back to the board with some feedback. So that certainly would be a possibility. So cool. I can reach out and see if I can find out a little bit about the timing once it does move forward. It's likely, you know, I'm guessing the first reports wouldn't be until, you know, end of the year, but
cool. One other quick point for just additional context. Even when Julia and myself testified to City Council, I think it was just a general, it was a lot of overarching statements, but we did SDC waivers were brought up, and there was some pretty there were some clear there was clear technical rationale in favor of the waivers even months back. So this has been stewing for a long time, just for everyone, the context for everyone on the board. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Lorraine?
Thank you, Amy. I'm glad we're talking about the SDCs again. My simple question is, what does success look like? I know there are some grand expectations out there about how many low-income units the city is looking to create with this waiver. However, I would like to know what the success look like, because when we have these grand proclamations, the goal post seems to shift. And next thing, 3 years later, we had 20 new units, and they're like, oh, that was success. And here we are 3 years later with our utility bureaus in dealing with issues of funding, infrastructure, maintaining. And it was interesting. I don't know how many of you all follow PBOT, Water Bureau, and all of that, but one of those 100-and-something-year-old line broke. There was a sinkhole not too long ago, and it was really interesting looking at what is down there. It's literally clay pipes. I had no idea that's what was down there when we're talking about 100-and-something-year-old, and they dug it out and repaired it. And so we have in Portland utilities running through clay pipes. Interesting. So there lies my concern. And also just a little bit of context on the committees. We did a lot of committee work prior to this reactionary way. And as you all know, the whole city has been in a reactionary mode with this transition of government. And a lot of people, we were learning as we went, where there was a time when we weren't even sure if POB would survive, if POB was even listened to, if POB would be acknowledged, and what was happening. So I am totally in support of that, and with the new POB members, I see that being a strong possibility as we settle into this new government process, and as we are actually now going to be navigating a full budget cycle under this new government system, and we'll see how that dynamic plays out. And so it's exciting time in the challenges that we've been dealing with, and I suppose the challenges that we are going to be responding to, and hopefully be proactive with going forward. So I just wanted to share that. And when I say what does this look like, that's a question I'm asking. If we could get some kind of clarification on that going forward.
I'll put that on the list, Lorraine. I think that is an important element of the reporting that I was talking about, because I believe that is really the foundation and the intent behind it is trying to see whether the number of units that they're anticipating and hoping could result are going to happen. And measuring against some of that, but I will see what I can find out about the timeline and the types of measures that they're looking at, and I'll put that on the list. All right. So Lauren, I think we can move on. And as always, if you have questions or thoughts outside of the meeting, feel free to reach out anytime. We will want to be thinking as early as possible about how to engage effectively in the budget process based on what we learned from this last one. And it's certainly been a little unpredictable as far as so I don't know what to expect, but planning and flexibility in our planning will always be valuable. So certainly we'll want to strategize that with you all, particularly as we bring new members on so that we can effectively engage you all. All right.
I think this is more you talking at us, Amy, which is appreciated.
Is it me?
No, it's
No,
very
I can't.
appreciated.
You're probably right.
I know you like to hear from us, but we need you.
Yeah, right. So we've talked very briefly about work plan and about the current year work plan, planning for next year. I think Kyle, even in this meeting, you kind of resurfaced some of the ideas around kind of being strategic moving forward. And so really the intent in having this at the end of the fiscal year and then as we move into the new fiscal year is twofold. One is to reflect a little bit on what has happened over the past year, which was largely reactionary, but also any key highlights, because as we close the year, staff will start drafting your annual report to council so that you all can provide feedback and be thoughtful about what it is you're communicating to council about the things that went well, the things that were, overly challenging, as well as what your plan is for the next year as far as priorities in order to advance your work, as well as react to what's going on. So at the end of the year, we usually trying to make sure, was there anything that you had intended to talk about that you haven't had the opportunity to, so that we can move it forward if possible, as well as doing that planning for the subsequent year. So we talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, or maybe 2 meetings ago, I can't remember. So the One Water and natural resource work will be kind of a central piece and likely one of your key priorities, at least as a response to what's going on, a city identified issue, because it's advancing, including starting with the One Water director recruitment, which communications have just come out about that, and we'll loop back around that before the meeting closes. And then even in the areas where you did not strategically move them forward, they were at least components of conversations, particularly during the budget process. So just a refresher of that. The work plan, again, is much broader than this list. These are the high priority items that were planned for active engagement this past year. I think Kyle and some others had made some points about if your list of priorities is too long, then it's difficult to move any of them forward, and encourage potentially identifying a shorter list of clear strategic priorities for the board to work on. So the goal is still also to be broad enough in the document that you're providing that it can be responsive to what's emerging, but then in a more active way, also figuring out how to more actively track your work and ensure that you're moving things forward and not dropping the ball on something that was a clear priority. Before I move on to the questions, I saw a hand go up and down, but I didn't track. Kyle.
Sorry, that was Kyle Chipman, voting member. I just didn't want to have my hand up and distract you while you were providing the overview. I have one follow-up from the kind of proposal or the vision I laid out either 1 or 2 sessions ago or a month ago, and then a question for representatives from the bureaus. The observation is the whole building a work plan that's visual and tracking dates and milestones, and that's all cool, and I believe in that fundamentally, but also it's a lot. It's a big to do. I think it feels like if we can just get subcommittees organized around key points of focus and enable people to coordinate outside of this hour and a half, that goes a long way to like really making measurable progress. And then work can be done in small clusters. However, I don't know how that plays out functionally, but it happens. And then consensus or proposals are brought up to this larger board for consensus, and then we can move forward. That feels like the rest of it. The work plan I was proposing was another way to be in service of that core. So is that like a feasible approach for the coming year that can work?
It absolutely is. So the key to identifying a subcommittee topic first, so identifying what the areas of interest are and what outcome you're hoping to work towards, I think is an important element. And then the other piece of that is at least one point person who's deciding to be the driver of that. So staff, of course, can do a lot of work and support depending on the number of subcommittees. It's not an indefinite number. Usually we've only had, one or two going so that you have the capacity for the internal support that you need, as well as the time to both be reactive to issues that are rising, as well as continue to move that forward. And so that is, I think, an important element, is making sure that there's somebody who understands what they're hoping to drive towards so that it can help guide and inform staff as we move it forward.
Cool. Thank you, Amy. That makes total sense. And that's really that spirit, whatever framework, don't really care. The spirit's there, and coordinate outside of this meeting. That's what I'm really excited about. Okay. The 2 points or bullet points that I don't see on this list that I would like to raise first for Bureau representatives and then potentially for the board. For the Bureau representatives, I am curious, following up on, it was still a reading or a summary we had back at the beginning of May around citywide asset management strategy and structure. Not only the current absence of citywide asset management, where Water Bureau and BES are, I think, separate, but also the feasibility of combining them. Is that totally outside the scope of this board? Is there any support we can provide, or even just that feels, from reading that breakdown, it feels so fundamental to especially with deferred investment and prioritizing how investments are made. It feels really critical, but I don't know how we engage with it. So a question to the Bureau reps.
And I'm going to note that I've noted the question. So I don't know that Bureau folks would be poised to respond in real time right now,
Cool.
Depending on who the right folks are within their organizations, particularly as they're doing some reorganization. I don't know who the right folks are. So welcome any of the Bureau staff to speak up if you wish to, but otherwise I've noted it, and I'll follow up with the bureaus and see if I can get an answer to the question, whether there is a space, what that space would look like, and how Pub could have an impactful role.
Thank you, Amy.
Hi, everybody. Farshad Al-Adadi, Business Services Group Manager. Just some really quick hit comments, Kyle. I think it is, from my perspective, and I think this is true for both BES and Water, our capital improvement plan, our CIP, both in terms of direct expenditure and what we finance and have to pay back on the debt service, accounts for about 2/3 of our budget. So I think that alone makes deepening your understanding of the city's asset management program totally appropriate. Of course, I think the focus being on the utilities, but I think that is an appropriate request. And I would also say that I think that there is a ground up approach through the CAMG, which is a kind of a a staff level organization of asset management practitioners in the city. I do believe there's an intention to elevate that to a more citywide approach and policy. But there is a rich amount of information right now that has been developed over the last several years around asset management. We're not starting from zero. And I think that also would be appropriate to have some discussions about as it relates to the utilities. But I think the budget connection alone makes it an important hook.
Awesome. Thank you, Farshad. And Amy, in follow-up or even in wording for the work plan, however, it gives us wiggle room just to have maneuverability to investigate, to contribute, to observe. Thank you, Farshad. That's super helpful, your response. Director Light, was there something going on camera you wanted to add?
I just wanted to add that I think it's also important that everything that what you're raising around asset management is critical, and I know that this is partly still stemming from the auditor's report, and it is something that I think when it comes to water and BES is important to remember that the Public Works group is working on the unified CIP, so our unified capital improvement. That alone is going to bring about better planning, coordination, all the things, better data insight, so that you can better manage your systems. So I think we may not see, even if we don't see the exact movement around asset management in the way that you may be thinking about it, this unified CIP work that's happening is a critical piece to good, sound asset management. I mean, just the conversations we're having around it are allowing us to do better coordination. I just wanted to make sure that if everyone wasn't connecting that is some significant work that's happening right now.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. Thank you for just being present and transparent and offering immediate insight that occurs through the moments. Thank you. The other point I wanted to raise, which is more for the board, it came out of conversations late last summer during our trip to the Bull Run facility. And here it is. Yeah. I just want to raise it because then I'll stop thinking about it if everybody's like, no, this doesn't make any sense. But if there's any room for us as a board to serve like connect with the existing messaging or community facing side of the bureaus, and if like the thought is if there's any way that we can gauge and register and potentially amplify or complement the messaging that goes out, and if there's any way that we can understand, gather or serve as a collection point for community response to then direct to the bureaus as well. So that's a big ask for like 11, soon to be 11 volunteers, but it is trying to think of a more formal approach to serve as stewards for the community, messaging going out and insights coming in. I put some thoughts on how that works, but it's like, that's a general idea. Does that resonate with anybody, or does that just seem like it's beyond our scope or bandwidth? Or is it even thinking in a clumsy way?
This is Amy. I was going to give space for if somebody else was going to jump in. I don't want to take the floor. This has been a topic that has ebbed and flowed with the prior board members, as well as understanding and trying to identify the right space in the community engagement role, and how I guess to be the most impactful, and as well as still leaving the core work to the professionals that are paid to, do effective engagement. And so I think we've struggled and challenged. So I raise it mostly because there has been the idea of a subcommittee talk about that in the past, and there was some work that came out of that, but not any real solutions. Things are also in transition significantly right now at the city with all of the changes that they're undergoing. And so engagement and how to effectively engage with community, including how what the role of advisory boards is in that work, I think is part of that conversation that's going to take place in the next several months with some sort of plan for the next year. Because we now have the dedicated engagement officer and they're looking at some reorganization of that central work, as well as how it interfaces with other bureaus and provides some guidance to advisory boards. So I think it is a strong topical area for if there's interest in either full board engagement or starting with some specific designees if there's folks who are particularly interested in pursuing that. So I guess all that to say, yes, I think there is potential for that conversation. I think it's still challenging to find that right balance because of the limited time of the board and how to best use the time that you commit to this work, because just like you indicate with the long list of priorities, you know, like I'm not looking to create additional work if we're struggling to just manage the ability to be educated and engaged enough to have impactful discussions around feedback on policies and budget, et cetera. Lorraine.
Thanks, Amy. My comment is not related to the prior discussion. Since this is the official end of Karen's 2 terms, I wanted to speak up before we end our meeting, because acknowledging, giving people their roses and everything, we must not wait until that other time when we do it. Okay. So let me speak as a first term board member, ending my first term just when Karen is ending her second term. Karen was kind of my North Star when I jumped into this thing. 2 feet, not knowing anything, lost, trying to figure out what is this whole utilities things? How do I utilize my skills, having worked with communities, having as an equity practitioner to advocate for my community? What does that look like? And I just want to say that Karen allowed me to bring myself. Not that I actually look for permission, as Amy and some of you all would know, but you provided that additional space for me to bring me, my concerns, how I see decisions impacting communities who is mostly represented by individuals who look like me, the circles that my circles that I work with and all of that. And I think it's appropriate at this time to acknowledge that, and also to thank you for sticking around. I wish you could have stayed for 10 more terms, because I value your perspectives, your voice, your expertise. And sometimes we just seem to align in the thinking. I just recently with the interview process, there was this candidate, and I was like, they hit it, you know, this looks good on paper. And Karen brought it. It's like, it was inauthentic. And I'm like, that's it, Karen. That was that last thing on my mind that I was thinking about. So yeah, in the last few minutes of this pub meeting, Karen, thank you, even when you didn't know that you were there, and I should have probably mentioned it sooner. And I hope that we can connect after you have stepped off, and I don't feel that that pressure of, oh my God, 2 pub members meeting and are we breaking the rules kind of thing. So I look forward to getting to know you better outside of this venue. And again, thank you for being that North Star.
Thank you, Lorraine. I think you share the sentiments of many of us. I am hopeful that this is not Karen's last meeting with us, or at least I haven't prepared for it to be, because she's been so gracious to hold out. But there is always that chance, especially as we look to kind of our busy summer schedule. So, but I hope that we have more opportunity, and if not in a meeting, then I certainly will find a space outside of this meeting to share the deep appreciation I know that I personally feel, and that so many of us have, for the work and the role, and particularly in the many times that you've chaired and just been an active member. So yeah, thank you, Karen, from all of us.
I'm not known for brevity, but I will say briefly, you're very welcome. And Lorraine, I'm very moved. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Just in case this is the last meeting.
And in light of that, I realize too that we have come to the end of the meeting. We only have a couple minutes left, and there may be some final pieces that we want to make sure that we've covered right before the end. So we will come back in the future and outside of meetings to conversation about the work plan. And Jonalyn, help me here to, oh yes, so we did want to just make sure that everybody saw, because I know that there's probably a lot of emails out there, because there was a pretty quick turnaround time. There was an email with a survey for some feedback on the recruitment for One Water director, and the responses are due tomorrow at 5. So if you have not seen it yet, please look for it if you have time, and submit some responses. The Deputy City Administrator Donna Paul will be meeting with pub leadership this week as well about future engagement and to get feedback. But we want feedback from as many of you as could find some time to fill out that survey. And we also, I was hoping part of the conversation as we talked about work plan, might identify whether there is a clear priority for the next meeting on July 17th. I do want to, based on the feedback that we had about people's availability, I don't think that there were a lot of folks who were available and planning to attend that meeting. I will be out of town and unable to connect virtually for that one as well. But if there is some work that could advance, particularly around some of the ideas, Kyle, that you were raising, or others around subcommittee work, then there's potential to use that space for those who are available, and Jonalyn will be supporting as well. But because we are out of time, I guess I'll ask that folks be looking for some communication from us as staff, and also connect with us at least by email or by phone, so that we can have some conversation and planning for that meeting, which is right around the corner for those who may be available for it. The July ARC meeting, Administrative Review Committee meeting, is not happening, so we are clear there, but there will be one on August 12th. And so we are looking for a volunteer for that meeting.
Amy, I can do that meeting. This is
Excellent.
Alexis. Sorry, I never say my
Yeah, no, gotcha. Thank you, Alexis. So yeah, Kyle.
Super duper quick. I think I flagged this in my follow-up with Amy and Jonah, but around the time when all the new folks start, I think it'd be lovely if we had an in-person meeting and like good shared energy. We're all kind of together, we connect as people, and then we have Zoom meetings. So just a loose thought for folks.
Yes, I appreciate that, Kyle. And Jonalyn and I have been talking about that anyway, that just how to create a space that even if it isn't where everybody's coming, that there is an opportunity for an in-person location at least a few times the year where at least she and I will be in a room together, and hopefully somebody has time and energy to join us if we can find a location that's convenient enough for folks. So we're actively going to be working on that, and part of what we talked about is trying to do it early in the fall so that it will be when new folks are on board and an opportunity for some more direct personal connection. Excellent. So we will be in touch about the July 17th. We do have the utilities affordability strategy that the staff from the bureaus had reached out to us about scheduling, but that likely won't be until early August, so would not be at the July meeting. So we just need to hear from folks if there's any clear priorities for that meeting, given the limitations of who may be present. So we'll be probably doing another offline survey and communication with you all about that to identify whether it needs to be canceled, rescheduled, or maybe turned into a subcommittee if there's a topic that would warrant it. So we'll check in with you all and also connect with the chairs about it. All right. With that, Lauren, I've talked the whole time, but I could officially let you call it to a close so that I don't talk the
you
entire
deserve
time.
I was going to say thank you for basically running the whole meeting.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thanks. Have a good day, everyone.
Be well. Take care, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.